Do you want to introduce it?
Would you like to introduce it?
No.
Hello, I am Oakley.
And I'm Birdbath.
And we are finally doing the Q&A that we promised you all. You all sent us a whole mountain of questions, so thank you so much for that. We apologize if we don't get to them all. I think if we don't get to all of them, then maybe we'll put the rest of them written in the comments or something, but we'll figure it out. Hiccups and all.
Yep. You ready?
I'm ready.
Why did you guys decide to thru hike the PCT? Was it something you've always wanted to...
Keep going. Roll it.
Why did you guys decide to thru hike the PCT? Was it something you've always wanted to do? Did your previous section hike play any part in your decision to hike the entire PCT?
I'm so distracted by that question, or by the hiccups. Why did we decide to hike the PCT? Well, we've always just been kind of intrigued by it. I mean, as a couple and I mean individually before that, we've always just had this kind of intrigue with hiking a long trail, specifically one that is near our home or goes toward home. We did a 500-mile section of the trail a couple of years ago, and lo and behold, never got it out of our system. So, what kind of experience did you have leading up to you deciding to hike the PCT?
I think that means like adventure experience. I don't know. We've been climbing mountains and we've been hiking. We live in the Pacific Northwest, so that's just kind of a part of the normal life up here. And so we had experience in snow, we had experience in heat, and some distance.
Hiking, backpacking. Yeah, but nothing too crazy. I mean...
No, not until our long section.
Yeah.
Where do you live?
We live in Portland, Oregon.
I'm from Bend. She's from Northern Washington, but we live in Portland now.
What do you both do for a living in the real world?
I am in corporate cybersecurity.
And I am a nurse, currently in the ER.
We both were in the Air Force before that, and she was a nurse there, and I was in law enforcement.
It looks like you've taken a few career sabbaticals, which is awesome. Can you share how you've done breaks and timing together as a couple? Would love to hear the pros and cons of these sabbaticals.
We did breaks. I mean, we both got out of the military at the same time. We both knew that we were going to try and come back to the Pacific Northwest, so that was an easy simultaneous break. And then we took another break with COVID happening. I wasn't happy where I was, and Cassie as a nurse was dealing with some of the worst parts of COVID. And so we took another break. And the pros are, well, you know, the cons are it's expensive, but the pros is, you know, you get to spend time together and accomplish some things. We weren't even sure if we'd be able to hike the Pacific Crest Trail due to health down the road. Who knows what would happen, and if this was our goal, this was kind of a window for us to be able to do it. Mm-hmm. So how were you guys able to step away from life for 5 months to make your PCT hike a reality?
We quit our jobs.
Well, before that, we saved a lot.
Yeah, we saved a lot. We planned for it really, and quit our jobs. I mean,
yeah. Ultimately,
that's really what it comes down to for us. I think is just taking that leap, and then everything else kind of fit into place. But that was the big step.
Yep. Any tips for making through the first, say, 200 to 400 miles?
Honestly, my tip is just to take it a day at a time. Take it a mile at a time if you need to. I had a lot of those, like, what am I doing moments, especially when it was really hot or really dry, and not the climate that I was used to. So for me, making smaller chunks out of it, smaller goals, and you'll get there.
Yeah. Small goals. Sometimes it was a matter of section by section. Sometimes it was resupply to resupply, food stop to food stop, and sometimes it was down to mile after mile. It kind of depended on how dark it was psychologically. So whatever small goals, very little of, obviously we were thinking about Canada the whole time, but a lot of it was chunk by chunk, piece by piece, section by section.
I couldn't even think about Canada. That was like so big and so far that
Small achievable goals. Any advice for the class of 2022?
Ironically, I think my general piece of advice is to not drown in everybody's advice. Take everything with a grain of salt. You know your body. Do what's best for you, and do what you think will make your journey best, for you. Not everybody's the same. Not everybody's adventure or PCT hike will look the same, and that's okay. Don't feel like you have to do something a certain way just because somebody else says so.
I think that keeping track of the why, everyone's got a different why, and everyone has a why enough to quit their jobs or to apply for the PCT permit or to fly down to San Diego or north or whatever. But knowing your why and remembering that, I think was big for me. We knew part of our why was because we had a goal to get from Mexico to Canada on a footpath, and that's what really got us through some of the hard times when hiking wasn't fun, because hiking parts of the trail isn't fun.
Right.
And that's not the trail's fault. It's conditions, it's you, it's your body. Some days you just don't feel good. Some days you don't want to be out there. But recalling that why and thinking about that is kind of what got me through those harder times. Yeah.
What section would you recommend for a beginning through hiker? I have a big drop of heights and sheer drops. What section has none of these or fewer of these?
Big fear of heights. Oregon.
Yeah.
Oregon is relatively flat. It's pretty safe, and it's pretty cool in my opinion. I'm biased, but I think Oregon's a good beginning section. I think the desert, it has a lot of good beginning sections, especially because you can be tested on some of those factors down there in short hikes.
I think time of year dependent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Early in the season or later in the season.
Yeah. Washington has a lot of height. The Sierras has a lot of height. NorCal has a lot of height, but the desert in Oregon, there isn't anything too scary on that. And
they're still beautiful.
Yeah, they're still very cool. I am an avid hiker and skier, but my number one irrational fear on the PCT is log and river crossings. Can you talk about those and whether there are any particularly scary ones or any tips that Cassie has?
Okay. Log crossings, river crossings, not an irrational fear. I think that's totally rational. I don't think I ever got comfortable with them in the entirety of the PCT. I think really the best way to get comfortable is really just to do it, but do it safely. If you need to train for it by doing a couple day hikes that have water crossings, if you need to do it with people around, if you need to wait and do like a partner crossing where you're holding someone's hands, do whatever you feel like you need to do, but don't not do it just because you're afraid of it. Yeah. What?
My philosophy with water crossings is if you can walk across a log or a balance beam in a playground, it's a similar action. It's a similar behavior. And it feels riskier and it feels scary because water's underneath you, but your odds of falling off are the same as walking across a log on ground. As long as you don't let it get to you psychologically.
I'm laughing because he told me this every river crossing.
It wasn't good. But in actuality, it is one of the more dangerous things of trail, but it is not that likely, and most of the situations in which people have serious injury or death are because they didn't unstrap their bags, and their bag is what dragged them downriver. So loosening your straps, putting away all of the extra stuff on those kinds of crossings. Look at the crossing.
Yeah.
Think about it. There's a crossing that looks sketchy here. Well, 100 feet up trail or up the bank, there might be something better. And everyone in front of you got through it their way, and so there's always a way, and you can always get good information from people who had already done the crossing as you're approaching it, because they had to cross it. Yeah. Knowing what you know now about how the fires have changed the nature of the hike, including detours and burned out landscape, would you still choose to engage in this through hike? I'm reading from other knowledgeable hikers that maybe the future of the quintessential PCT through hike is becoming less manageable, since the bar keeps getting raised for conditions that were not previously as present as they were now.
There's a lot in that question. I think first and foremost, yes, I would absolutely do the trail again. There were a lot of fires this last year, and I would absolutely do the trail again this year. I think that nature changes. Nature is not static. Therefore, the trail is not static. And the hike in 2010 was not the hike in 2021, nor was it in 2019. Is that always for the benefit or the pleasure of the hiker? No. Does that mean you shouldn't do it? No.
I mean, I think people have been dealing with fire closures for a long time on the PCT, though there was a particularly bad year last year. I mean, there's ways around it. It depends on how your philosophy of your hike and whether those sections are important to you or a continuous footpath is important. There's a bunch of different ways to approach it, but fires are not new on the PCT. And I mean, we hiked through a lot of burns from previous years. Yeah. We hiked the section we hiked a couple years ago was not available this year. It just changes, and there is definitely a form of beauty and appreciation, I think, when you're going through a burn section, because absolutely. That is a natural thing. Yes, some of them are man-made, unfortunately, I think a lot of them, but the act of wildfire breathes new life, and manzanita comes back, and you'd be surprised at how quickly the foliage returns and the nature returns, and it's just kind of part of the cycle. Yeah. After watching your hike, I think I want to do the sections from Oregon and Canada after I retire. How would you rate those sections 1 through 10, with the most difficult being a 10?
I mean, I don't totally know. There's so many sections within that, but I would say Oregon in general is on the more easier to moderate side, and Washington is definitely harder. I, in a lot of ways, would compare Washington to the High Sierra, just at a lower altitude. Yeah,
a lot of elevation change in Washington.
Yeah.
Oregon's really flat. Northbound, starting at the Oregon border, going up to Canada might be good to get legs going during the Oregon sections. Yeah. And inevitably, mosquitoes will be strong at some point during an Oregon to Washington hike. But it really depends on the section. Oregon is definitely a good, it's probably one of the easier sections of trail, generally, Oregon. And Washington is more challenging. Advice for blisters. Did you use toe socks?
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this question. I think I had blisters every single day of the trail, and that is not an exaggeration, unfortunately. I tried toe socks probably too late. I think if I could go back, I would try toe socks from the beginning. Otherwise, just foot care, I think, is really important. Keeping your feet dry. A lot of people use tape on trail, Band-Aids, what's that? The thick stuff.
Liquid tape?
No, not liquid tape. The thick stuff I didn't end up using.
Moleskin.
I think the biggest way to prevent is to like go on a couple hikes in your shoes, see where your hot spots are, and practice prevention and treatment kind of on trail, like on even day hikes.
I think the more you wear your shoes before you get on trail, beyond blisters, just injury in general, the more conditioned the shoes become to your feet and your feet become to the shoes.
Yeah.
You can go for a run in your shoes, just for a little bit, and it kind of accelerates some of that break-in and some of those hot spots.
And if you're not a runner, just walk in them.
Yeah.
What would you do differently if you had to do it all over again?
I think we've talked about this and we've decided planning less. I mean, we planned this trail for 8 to 10 years, informally on various levels. We went into this trail with some snacks that we prepared to be mailed to us, and your stomach changes, your interest changes. Sometimes boxes are inconvenient to deal with, and so I probably would have bought less junk food ahead of time and relied more on the offerings as they came. Dietary restrictions can mess that up, but for us, I think less planning on that would have made sense.
Yeah, less planning on everything, really. I mean, for me in particular, because I got I tried to get very into the weeds on day to day and how many miles a day and when you're going to hit a certain town. And us, at least, that just wasn't realistic in the end.
And you're going to go through, 5 pairs of shoes. I think a big piece of advice for both of us is to find shoes that work for you and buy enough of them. We had to change shoes midway through trail. Not a huge thing for me because my model didn't change much, but that's where all of her shoe issues came from. And if she had bought in advance the shoes that she needed. I mean, the worst case scenario is you buy them, they're expensive, and then you come off trail early or you don't go on trail, and then you just have a bunch of shoes that are ready to go. So they don't expire. So getting shoes in advance.
What's next from an adventure perspective? Keeping it real, you two are great.
Thanks. We don't know. We've been talking about the Colorado Trail. We've been talking about the Continental Divide Trail. We've talked about the Oregon Coast Trail. We have other hobbies like skydiving. We're going to go do some of that and get, some jumps in. But we don't know.
We'll see.
Do you know?
No.
Okay. I don't know. We'll find out. Something.